Good morning, good afternoon, or good night to everyone. My name is Johnny Girardi. I'm DataSelf's founder and CEO. As you can tell here on my license plate that reads Data Geek. I am a big data geek. When I showed my license plate to my daughter for the first time, my teenager daughter, for her to see what I meant, and she read Date a Geek. And I cracked up. That was not the intention. Yes, I'm single, but no, it's really data geek. I've been doing this, business intelligence for small and mid-sized companies for over 20 years. I was a software engineer in my early career, became a business person. And since 2005, I've been leading DataSelf as a company helping, again, mid-sized organizations, small and mid-sized organizations do better with reporting. I'm excited here to do this presentation with Jordan. Jordan, would you introduce yourself, please?
Yep, thanks, Johnny. Hi, my name is Jordan Schneeman. I'm an analyst here at DataSelf. I'm responsible for assisting with the development and the build out of the Power BI solution. And I'm excited to go through a lot of the cool stuff that we have under the hood and just, inform everyone with some of the cool Power BI stuff that we have.
Jordan? All right. So first of all, let me just go to the next slide here. And we have some polls to kick off. We're going to spend about 5 minutes with a quick introduction. We'll talk about the business benefits, the business challenges, and how we can help from a business standpoint. So if you're more business focused, the first 20, 25 minutes is what really you want to stick around to learn. And then on the last part, Jordan's going to kind of open the hood and talk about in more detail challenges that people have with Power BI and how we can actually assist, or how you can learn new things, new tricks, and new techniques to address those issues. Just before we launch into the presentation, I would like to see if you guys can go through a poll. See if I launch the poll. Has it launched? Yeah.
Yep, I see it.
Thank you. So if you could please, answer the questions quickly, and then press the apply button. Seconds. All right. I'm going to end the poll. Oh, results are still coming in. Thanks for sharing your thoughts. So let's go to the next slide here. As I mentioned originally, we are in the business of empowering businesses, mostly small and mid-sized businesses, with ways to get your data from your systems, your ERP, CRM, point of sales, inventory system, payroll, Google Analytics, no matter what your data is, to help put into a BI solution in Excel doing so. The focus today is Power BI. We have been helping companies doing any kind of BI, and as Power BI became an amazing tool for the past 10, 15 years, we have embraced it, and we're also augmenting and also run into many of the challenges that people are facing out there and helping solve them. Especially if you're trying to get data into Power BI from ERP, CRM, payroll, and whatnot. There's a lot of challenges in the process of doing things from scratch that today you're going to be seeing why you might be facing some of those issues and how you can do better. So we'll talk about that. The first exciting news on the Power BI and the overall BI journey is so exciting. If you're a data geek like Jordan and I, and every day when you read the news of what Microsoft is doing, what the Power BI, the Fabric, and all the tools around the ecosystem, it's like, being in a candy store, a kid in a candy store. Oh my God, there's so many features. What can I use? Which one should I use? And sometimes they take it away. They kill the toy that you just chose, and then you have to choose another one. It's exciting, but sometimes also a little bit overwhelming. But it's, overall, it's an exciting time to be in this business. Microsoft has been saying for a long time, Power BI 5 minutes to wow. And usually, if you are already in the Power BI journey, is because you were wowed by how amazing Power BI is. And I usually tell the first 5 minutes is just wow, wow, wow. But when you decide to embrace and make it work across the company, usually 5 hours later, once you have the wow, now you need to know what you're doing. You need to know your systems. You need to know how Power BI works. You need to know data models, security or refresh. There's a lot of things that a company needs to do really well for Power BI to continue to wow across multiple teams, across multiple areas successfully. So 5 minutes is the initial wow, but it takes some sweat and tears many times to really expand the wow in the long run across everything. And it's completely possible to continue to wow and not be too demanding in your resources. I tell people that nowadays, some of the biggest challenges of making Power BI excel is people, finding the right people, the people that know, your data, that know Power BI, that know how to model, that understand your business problems, know how to solve it. Finding these people is not easy, and keeping these people doing Power BI is sometimes challenging. Sometimes they are promoted, they get too busy, or they change jobs, and then the project might hit a wall. And sometimes you hire someone else, or you bring someone else to the team, and sometimes this other person doesn't understand what the other person did or the other people did, and then they start from scratch and they break things. So part of the challenge is just human nature. It's people, having people that can actually maintain your Power BI project successfully in the long run, knowing what you need and how to do things. AI is coming all over the place to help with this process. And part of the challenges is amazing having AI as an aid to facilitate. But AI is not a magic wand. Hopefully never will be. Hopefully we'll continue to have our jobs. And you'll have to continue to rely on people that knows a lot of things, including Power BI, to make the journey successful. The other challenge is technology changes fast and every day. Probably you're changing your systems quite frequently. If you're using Microsoft Stack, good luck. Pretty much every day, every quarter, every month, they have new things, better things, and they change the direction sometimes. So it's challenging, no matter if it's Microsoft, all the vendors, they always changing. So keeping up with the changes and how they affect your system is challenging. And sometimes if you don't have an expert assistance to help your internal team to keep up with those changes, that's also challenging. One of the most challenging things, if you have been doing BI for a while, is just building your own custom model or data modeling around your reporting needs. Pretty much by default, the majority of the companies out there, when you're doing your data modeling, we call a custom data modeling. Whoever started and whoever's working, they are doing the way that they think is best. And it's quite often is very personal, is very unique. And if you don't document things properly, which many people don't like to document, if you don't follow necessarily best practices, the modeling tends to become a spaghetti code in the long run, and we call this spaghetti model. So it's not unusual that, if you are in Power BI 3 years into the Power BI journey, and if you're getting sophisticated, if you that have not been involved in this process and you open the hood, you want to see the modeling, it is freaking hard to understand how the model works. So it's very common to become like a spaghetti model and very complex, because we call this a custom-made modeling approach. So we're going to be talking about more about that, and Jordan will open the hood and discuss some of those details. And the last thing that to me has been my personal journey from 20 plus years is, should you embrace a data warehouse, or when should you embrace a data warehouse? Tools like Power BI, and you look at competitors like, Tableau, Looker, Domo, and whatnot, they all claim that, no, you don't need a data warehouse. We have enough ETL in our Power BI that you might not need it. So don't worry about it. Well, I tell people, worry about it, because one of the challenges is, if some point in your future, data warehouse becomes a requirement and you didn't start from scratch, it can be a nightmare for you to untangle the customer noodle or spaghetti you built in your model into data warehouse 1, 2, 3 years down the road. So I usually tell people, if you find a data warehousing solution that is inexpensive, easy to use on day one for your Power BI, start with it, because Power BI and data warehousing together are awesome. And in the long run, you don't have to recode, you don't have to, break your model to restart. And that's part of our journey. We help usually companies to see you can start with the data warehouse from day one, or whatever the data that you're doing already, your Power BI, attach a properly designed data warehouse along with Power BI and make Power BI journey even more successful. So we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through this webinar. DataSelf specifically from a business value, we have 3 main business values. The first one is, just as I mentioned, we bring data warehousing framework, and we have our own ETL tool. It's called DataSelf ETL Plus. ETL stands for Extraction, Transformation, and Loading. Power BI has ETL functionality, yes, but Power BI really excels at data visualization, and it does ETL, fine. It does fine, but it's not an ETL tool. It's in some of the data problems that people have. If you don't solve them with a data warehouse, Power BI is going to be clunky. It's going to be slow, and it's going to be complicated to address. So usually, in the long run, Power BI will benefit from having an ETL/data warehouse to complement. It can be your own data warehouse on premises, your private cloud, can be Azure SQL, can be eventually into the Fabric, no matter where you put it, but a data warehouse is usually a big part of your journey in the long run, and we absolutely have tools to help with the data warehousing problem. So that's value number 1. The number 2 is, in 20 years, one of the things that DataSelf has learned and put together is not a custom code modeling, but a module, a product that we call DFT, Dimension, Fact, and Time. Is actually a well thought out, a clean and well organized way to bring your raw data from your systems like your ERP, your CRM, your payroll, whatever it is, into a layer called DFT, where you put dimensions in the proper dimension structure, the facts into the proper fact structures. There's time to help with the Power BI time analysis. And this layer usually isolates the uniquenesses of your source systems into reporting. And why we do that? For 2 main reasons. One is because we're separating the plumbing from the analytics. So people who know plumbing, they can focus on that part of the problem to bring the raw data into the DFT layer, while the business analyst role, which is usually not necessarily a database person, is more of a business analyst person, they don't need to understand the uniquenesses of the data source. They just look at the dimensions, facts, and times in the DFT layer, and they can do their job without knowing specifics of the data source. Once we show this to you in more practical terms, you'll see the big value of this splitting. And the second main reason is because small and medium-sized businesses, they are always or frequently changing their digital systems. Sometimes they change the ERP from, I don't know, QuickBooks into something more modern, or something bigger, like, NetSuite or Sage or Microsoft or Acumatic and whatnot. Then when you change, now if you have built your Power BI for your, let's say, QuickBooks, and now you go to Microsoft Dynamics, you have to do things all over again. The DFT layer eliminates a lot of that overriding of your Power BI modeling, because it isolates again the uniquenesses of your source system to the reporting layer. When Jordan shows that, what I'm telling you is going to make sense. But the DFT layer is also a big value that we add for clients. Third is long-term BI expertise and support your team. And DataSelf, we have, in the course of 20 years, we have today about 35 people. We're all mostly data geeks that every day we wake up excited to learn, to help companies like you guys to do better. and we can be a augmentation of your BI team. Sometimes we can be working with your team on an ongoing basis, or we can be here to train you how to do better, how to use best practices. Then we get out, and if one day your team or some of your people leave and you need to get someone else to help until you hire someone else, so maybe you need to train a new person, we can be here to assist you with ongoing BI expertise and support in Power BI, in data modeling, in data warehousing, if you choose to choose data warehousing, as well as in data sources, reports and dashboards for mid-sized companies. So BI expertise is a big chunk of why many companies use DataSelf to help the Power BI project to be more successful. ETL that I'm showing here, like any ETL tool, we can bring data from all data sources. There are more than 400 data sources. That is a no-code approach. You don't need to write Python. You don't need to write any code to extract. The QR code on this page, it's not here. Where is the QR code? Accidentally, I deleted the QR code on this page, but we'll send by email later a link to our page where we list the 400 plus sources that requires no coding to bring data into the data warehouse and into your Power BI project. As I mentioned, we support Power BI, but we also support many other products. Some of our clients, not many, but some of them, they use more than one analytics tool. So we support more than Power BI, as I call the lipstick of the BI solution. I'm going to give a very brief tour in our DFT layer. The DFT layer, the dimension factor and time, we take data out of the box, pre-mapped, pretty much on day one. If you're using some popular systems in the mid-market systems, such as ERP, CRM, and whatnot, we take a lot of the tables from those systems. We automatically, through ETL Plus, put into your data warehouse. Then we model them into the DFT layer and eventually connect to a Power BI semantic model and eventually into the Power BI reports and dashboards. We have more than 5,000 Power BI reports and dashboards as a library. The idea is once we provision your DataSelf solution with your Power BI, on day one, once we have provisioned, on average, 80% of starting from scratch, your Power BI journey would be done on day one. 80%, of the extraction, the fine-tuning, the keys, the primary keys, a lot of things are ready on day one. And what I'm going to show you now is just where you can go and learn more about this library. And here we have the QR code. If you take a picture, you can go to the same place where I'm going to show you next. So if you go to that QR code, you're going to go to our knowledge base page, to this particular page here, where you have the Power BI templates at the workbook level showing reports and dashboards. If you choose the enterprise, is the one that we have the most reports and dashboards. And you can keep on picking and choosing some of these modules. You're going to be able to see a list of reports and dashboards. Let's say if I click AR aging, we have multiple, pretty much any ERP system that you use, we can quickly connect this DFT layer to that ERP, let's say to do AR aging analysis. And if you scroll through this, you're going to see some screenshots as well as a list of the reports and dashboards available. So there's quite a few for AR.
Hey, Johnny, are you sharing your screen?
Oh, you're not seeing what I'm showing?
I don't know if it's just me or if everyone else is. Mine just went away.
Let me stop and reshare it. All right, let me know if you can see it now.
Yeah, I see it.
All right, perfect. So just going back a little bit, that QR code that I showed before goes to this page here. And if you choose the enterprise, you're going to go to the list of modules we have ready to connect to ERP and CRM systems. And if you choose a module like AR aging, then you're going to be able to see a list of reports and dashboards, including some screenshots. And as you can tell, there is a lot of things included. As I mentioned, there are more than 5,000. If you choose cash flow projection, for instance, same thing here. You're going to be able to see the list. If you go to inventory planning, which is also a pretty popular one, you can see descriptions, screenshots and whatnot. And just one more here. Sales is the most popular. Many companies are looking for Power BI to do a better sales analysis. We have more than 1,300 reports and dashboards in this library. And some people say, you know, what I want, you don't have ready. Why would I need such a large library with 5,000? Think of it of being a library of, you don't need to read 5,000 books. Nope. When you go to a library, you want to find one, maybe two books that you want to read. And if you have a library with, you know, no books, then every time someone has to build a freaking book for the reporting dashboard. If you have a library with, you know, 5,000, the odds are most likely what you're looking for. There's already something done or close to. And sometimes if it's close, with a few tweaks, you can fix it. So what we have found is many of our clients, when they use this library, the main point is decision makers will find a lot of the questions ready to go, answered, ready to go, or close to. And it's 5,000, you know, it's not all of them, it's not a million, it's not all, but the 5,000 have grown out of a list of clients asking us for reports. And every time we have seen that the report can be generic for other users, we add to the out of the box. We started with this vision in 2007 with only a few dozen reports. And over the years, it grew to actually 8,000. We're building even more. And the main idea is to accelerate the time to make more informed decisions and to help decision makers be more self-sufficient. So the library usually is a big chunk of the value. Having said that, now for those of you who want to learn more the how and the why, Jordan's going to open the hood and give some more details on the technical side. Jordan?
Thanks, Johnny. Yep. So we're going to start here with, before we get into under the hood and the modeling, I think it's good to start with the main challenges. There's 5 that we see across a lot of Power BI projects. So the first problem and challenge that we see is companies relying on manual refreshes. There's a lot of reasons why you don't want to do manual refreshes, but the main being it reduces the efficiency and it also raises risk while adding a dependency layer. Since your semantic model has to be manually refreshed, a person has to manually do it. So that's a dependency that I think every firm out there wants to mitigate. The second, this is one of the most common challenges: slow refresh times and refresh failures. This is a result of a lot of different things. It's most common a result of a poorly designed model, or as Johnny mentioned earlier, Power BI, the back end of Power BI, it's like Power Pivot. So what a lot of clients do is they'll connect to a data source and then they'll do their transformations in the back end of Power BI, renaming columns, changing value types, that type of thing. That's one of the worst things you can do, especially if you want your model to scale and refresh efficiently, because every time Power BI goes to refresh, it's going to go to the table that has all those transformations and it's going to run it row by row. So this is the second challenge. Again, probably the most common. And this is kind of where the database and ETL comes into play, pushes everything upstream, and then Power BI is just going to read from the model. The third is inconsistent KPIs across multiple reports. Essentially, what this means is there's no single version of truth. It's common for a lot of companies to have, for every Power BI report, there might be a different semantic model for each report. One user will just have two people. You can have Jim, and then you can have Carla. Jim might be building a report to get some sales invoice numbers for you. Carla might be doing the same report. The issue of the approach of having two different reports with two different models is Jim is probably going to do something, his modeling one way, Carla is going to do the same. When it comes to actually calculating the measures and the metrics in Power BI, they also are probably going to do some things a little bit different. So standardizing your KPIs and having a single source of truth for all of your company's data, or just segmented. You can have a data set for your invoice data, your sales order, either or. We're going to get into that after. That's also best practice. And then the last two are, the first one is limited ideas for KPIs. So as I'm sure a lot of us are aware, BI projects are a big initiative. It often takes, I know the slide, we say days, weeks, or months. It's usually months. There's a lot of work and effort that goes into actually building your Power BI semantic model, structuring the data how it needs to be structured for Power BI to run it efficiently. And then the last layer, once that is done, is actually building your reports in Power BI, which takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. When it comes to KPIs, a lot of there might be some limited KPIs that a business is using. Whereas with our approach, the out of the box, we have thousands of KPIs. So there's most likely a KPI that you've never thought of, might not have heard of, but a lot of our out of the box models have all of this built in. So that's another big feature that we solve. And then the last point is just the frustration that comes with trying to connect and blend data from multiple sources. This point specifically, this is where ETL is going to come in. Okay, next slide, John. Okay, thanks. So with the challenges being addressed, this is where DataSelf comes in. We have an extensive selection. Johnny mentioned it earlier. We have way over 1,000 pre-built reports and dashboards. This spans across a lot of different areas: accounting, sales, operations, just to list a few. And then the other thing that the other benefit with our pre-built Power BI reports is these reports and these dashboards, they're all very easy to be customized. They're ready to use right out of the box. And then there's also templates, QA templates that can be customized and just help before you go live with reports. There are templates designed to validate your data and make sure that the numbers and the metrics are matching the source system that we're pulling from. And then the last 2 points, just some benefits: accelerated insights. So once ETL is set up and the data is populated into the data warehouse, that is where our Power BI model comes in. Since the model is already pre-configured, I'm going to show this, I believe, in the next 2 slides from now. Since it's pre-configured from day one, once the data is deployed in the database, the reports and the model are ready to launch. It's as easy as connecting it to the server in the database, and then having everything refresh through, and then the reports are going to connect to it. So the real benefit that you're going to get from that is quicker time to value and reduced development efforts. As I mentioned before, with BI projects, it often does take many months, whereas with this approach, it's days to go live. And then the last benefit is just improved decision making, since everything is going to be streamlined right off the bat. Once it's deployed, you're going to be able to get data-driven analytics and insights. Next slide, Jerry. Okay, so we covered just an overview. Now we're going to get into ETL plus. I'm not going to go too into depth, but this is the starting point for our entire model. Without ETL, there really isn't. We have all the models, but ETL is the it's the concrete and that kind of holds everything together. So it all begins with ETL. ETL is optimized for Power BI. What ETL is doing is it is handling a lot of the ETL process, extract, transform, load. It's bringing in the data into a data warehouse. For Power BI specific use cases, we recommend Azure SQL. The primary reason for that is Azure SQL is a Microsoft product, just like Power BI is. So that being said, there's a smooth integration between the two, and there's no need for a data gateway. Typically, depending on the source, when you connect Power BI to, it could be whatever data warehouse it might be, um, depending on the permissions, you may need a data gateway. It's common. Gateway goes down, your model and reports aren't going to refresh. So again, that's another dependency that we could have from not using Azure SQL. So you can see we have this slide is just going over some of the reasons why Azure SQL eliminates the gateway. So the first one being its native cloud integration, as I mentioned before. It's Microsoft, it's integrated very well with Power BI. It's a cloud-based service. So you have the cloud integration. When it comes to security and compliance, it utilizes Microsoft Entra ID authentication. There's firewall rules and encryption settings to ensure secure data access. And then the last two, it also helps with performance and scalability. Behind the scenes, Azure SQL has a lot of different things. They've elastic scaling, they've automatic performance tuning, and they're also kind of geared towards large data sets. So as your company grows, more data, the database is automatically going to scale up for that. And then the last thing I want to mention is I don't know how familiar everyone is with Power BI or where you are in your data journey, but when it comes to connecting to the data source, Power BI has two methods. There's direct query, which is essentially a live connection, if you will, to your Azure SQL or your database. And then there's import mode. Import mode works in the sense that every time the Power BI model is refreshed, could be automatic, scheduled, or manual, it's going to reload all of the data and save it in that file. There are benefits to both. I always recommend import, but for direct query, which there are some situations where you would want to go that route, Azure SQL has a much better connection as opposed to other databases. You're able to do more with the direct query. Next, Jeremy. You can go to the next slide. Yep, thanks. All right, so with DataSelf BI, the need for manual refreshes is eliminated. We mentioned this in the beginning as being a common pain point. The three challenges with a manual refresh, we kind of touched on it earlier. There's operational inefficiency, where you have to manually trigger an update. That requires someone to physically go in and trigger it at a certain point in time. There's increased risk, human errors when refreshing. That's a big one. I've seen that a lot. And then timing of data refreshes. If something is being refreshed manually, there isn't really a set time that it's going to be refreshed, and you can run into some data integrity issues. Typically, the refresh cycles, it's always going to be on a schedule, and on all of our reports, there's going to be timestamps. So when someone looks at the report, they're always going to be able to know when it was refreshed. They're not going to have to go reach out and try to figure out, hey, when was this manually refreshed? And then the last challenge with manual refreshes are scalability issues. As volume grows, it's just going to become impractical to refresh the data sets manually. And this is where our BI solution comes in. So with the help of ETL Plus, the Power BI modeling that we're going to get into in the next slide, and just automated refreshes through ETL. And also through the Power BI service, we're able to address all of this. We're able to set up automated refreshes. You're going to be able to, in the future, in an upcoming release, go in to ETL and update whatever a specific table in Power BI. You're not going to have to refresh the whole model. You'll be able to automatically kind of connect to that table in an easy to use user interface and refresh it if you wanted to. And then the last piece with our BI solution is governance. Governance is huge, especially when a company undergoes the initiative of going to a BI project. There's a lot of sensitive data, and I know that that's usually one of the most important things that a company has to think about and manage. So I just want to address this with our out-of-the-box solution. We have built in from day one row level security and object level security, both of which can be customized. Row level security is often customized. That has to do with specific user, what data they're essentially able to see at the row level. So if you have, let's say you have an office I'm based in Florida, so let's say there's an office in Fort Lauderdale, you can apply a row level security. So I'm able to only see invoices or orders associated with the Fort Lauderdale office. I'm not able to see anything else. Object level security has to do with the actual objects. So think of this as table entities. You have a master model that has all of your data. You have your sales invoice, your sales order, your purchase order. If you only want me to be able to see purchase order and sales order information, that's where object level security comes in. It's permissioning based off a specific table entity. You can go to the next page, Johnny. So this is the fun stuff. This is where we start getting into our DFT layer and yeah, different use cases. So we're going to run through these scenarios really quick. These may, I'm sure if you already have a BI project with Power BI, I'm sure some of these scenarios may apply. I hope that they don't, but it's a lot of these scenarios are pretty common. So the first scenario is the manual export dependency. So what this scenario has to do with, it has to do with a team regularly exporting flat files from, could be any source, could be any of your source systems. You're exporting them to Excel, maybe whatever you're using as a database. And big issue with this is the dependency. Everything, when you're building a BI project, everything should be scheduled when it comes to the refreshes. And yeah, there's a lot of issues with this scenario. The second scenario is local file dependency. This is most common in, I see this most often in companies that are kind of in the inception of taking on a Power BI initiative. Power BI has two different routes. They have Power BI Desktop, which is a free desktop app. That's typically where all the development comes in. That's like where you build the reports and everything. And then there's Power BI Service. Power BI Service, it's web-based, pretty much in the cloud, and that's where you're publishing everything. And then that's where users are able to log in and actually consume their reports and gain insights. But typically when a company starts, they might not be aware of the licensing involved or just some nuances with the Power BI service. So what they do is they build a Power BI file, they save it, it's saved as a PBIX file, and then they just share that file internally amongst their team. A lot of downsides to that. First being you have to refresh it manually every time, and then second, there's no version control and it's inefficient. So that's the second scenario. The third scenario is inefficient data modeling. So Power BI is designed, Microsoft designed it to be, there is a lot of code that goes into it depending on what you're doing with it, but they designed it as very low code, no code. They wanted your average business user to be able to connect and build charts, kind of gain insights, which is great, but Power BI is extremely, extremely complex, especially when you want to build something the right way, when you want it to scale, when you want it to be accurate. So even though Microsoft tries their best to make it easy to build some basic reports, you run into the issue with actually setting up the model in Power BI, structuring relationships, and using one table, essentially, just kind of having one large flat file that contains all of your data. Power BI, the next slide, we're going to get into this. Power BI does very well with data modeling, and there's a lot of nuances that go into it in order to have the model refresh and everything to be, all your numbers and your data to be accurate. The last scenario, this is more common to companies that are already using Power BI. So this is to do with overloaded DAX calculations. What DAX is stands for data analysis expression. It's a Power BI. It's Power BI's language. Like when you want to build measures, it's basically the syntax in order to kind of create a measure. One thing that commonly observed with this is the measures are often overloaded, where a lot of companies may be trying to do advanced calculations in the measure itself, or just basic calculations in the measure itself, when all of that should be pre-aggregated into the data warehouse. Again, that's where ETL comes in, but this is another scenario that I see. And the biggest issue from this scenario specifically is if you're looking at your Power BI report, you might encounter issues where the visuals are just spinning because it just evaluate all the data. It's not present all the time, which it should be. All of these scenarios, you can see the four costs associated. Increased maintenance effort, we talked about that. Scalability issues, duplication of effort, and slow and inefficient processing. So again, there's a lot of modeling that has to go into this, and yeah, these are the four most common scenarios. So next slide, Johnny. So getting into the next slide, this is where we're gonna touch on.
Just a note.
Yep.
John, just a note, you have, so if you can finish in 10 minutes.
Yep.
So.
Okay, so this is where the DFT layer comes in. This is our proprietary modeling method. This is the solution to everything that I just mentioned above when it comes to inefficient modeling issues, all that kind of stuff. So the basics of it, I'm going to go too into depth here. Johnny discussed a lot of it, but it's split into three different table types. We have dimension tables. Think of these as they're your qualitative tables. They store descriptive attributes, product name, region, that type of a thing. Then we have our fact tables. These are our quantitative tables. They store your measurable data, your sales invoice amounts, quantity amounts, that type of thing. And then we have our timetable, which is our date related field. Power BI has a lot of date time functionality, and having a predefined timetable, if you will, is crucial in the model. And yeah, I'll just touch on the last bullet point because I know we have 10 minutes. So what the next slide, we're going to go through some examples, but here at DataSelf, this is our primary approach. And yeah, everything from day one out of the box, everything is going to be pre-built, clean, scalable, and pre-configured. So the real benefit from this, besides all of the efficiency gains and the time savings, is since everything is standardized and well documented, if there is internal turnover of someone who is working on some of this stuff, everything's going to be documented. It's not so and so built it this way. What did they do? And a lot of this also is all best practice when it applies to data modeling and Power BI. Next slide, Johnny. So next 3 slides, we're going to get into just the modeling. So this is very common, and it's also very bad. So typically, what we see is flat tables. So companies take their data, they export it, they put it in one table. They might just set up a huge GI and kind of have that be their table, and then they'll bring that one table into Power BI. This may work in the short term, may work in the interim, but long term, this is not going to work. There's a lot of issues with this. There's performance issues. It's not very scalable. As the company grows, that's when if you're not experiencing issues, you will. And then you're limited on relationships. Power BI, as I mentioned earlier, Power BI likes to have a model, typically a star schema, snowflake schema, galaxy schema. Power BI likes to have everything divided into dimension tables and a fact table. I don't want to get too specific, but that's how the backend kind of evaluates all the data. That's the structure that Power BI likes. Last 2, there's a lot of redundancy, a lot of repeated values with flat tables. And then once you actually get into building your report and having to rely on DAX for your measures to kind of aggregate your numbers, it's going to require a lot more complex DAX. Just because it's a flat table, there's going to have to be a lot of internal filtering done within the DAX calculation, which is going to be extremely slow. Next slide, Johnny. So that being said, we have 2 models, both of which are out of the box here at DataSelf. This is the first model. So this is a module-based model. You can see it follows a star schema. In the center, we have sales invoice. So this is a sales invoice module. And then all of the tables around it are the dimension tables. So just the categorical values. This model has some benefits, has some challenges. Benefits, there's independent development, so different teams can work on different modules separately without interfering with one another. When it comes to access, permissions can be managed at the specific module level, which is going to help ensure users access only relevant data. This approach also tends to be a faster deployment just because there's one model for each module. It typically doesn't require too many adjustments. And then the last one is simplified security. So it's just easier to have one model and grant access on that module. Since it's a sales invoice, you can come to the sales invoice module, grant access there. Tends to be simpler. Challenges associated with this view are risk of data silos. So separate models can lead to inconsistencies in reporting, different transformations and definitions. There's limited cross-module analysis with this approach. So if you want reports that pull from sales order and sales invoice, you are going to be very limited with this approach. This also may have an increased maintenance effort because if a module needs an update, you're going to have to go and do it one by one to each of the models. So sales invoice, sales order, purchase order as an example. And then the last is limited reusability. So when you have a unified model, you're able to kind of use that as a point of truth. Whereas with this approach, you're going to be able to use it as a point of truth for that specific module, but it's not it's going to be harder to reuse. Next slide, Johnny. So this is the unified model. This is, we offer both. There's pros and cons I mentioned to both. This is my personal recommendation. It has a galaxy schema. So what that means is instead of having one fact table and then a lot of our dimension tables, you can see here we have all the tables in the center row. Those are all fact tables. So all of the data points are essentially in tables are brought into one model. Benefits from this approach: single source of truth. This is going to ensure consistency across all of your reports and dashboards. It's efficient when it comes to data management. Everything is going to be centralized in this one model, whereas in the other approach, you might have separate models that you're going to have to manage. Everything is going to be in this one single Power BI PBIX file. Unlike the prior approach, it does support cross-module analysis, so you'll be able to report on all of the modules in the same report. And then when it comes to some of the challenges, I want to make sure we touch on this: security management, complexity, and risk. Risk is a big thing with this challenge. Biggest thing with risk, I mentioned we have the row level security and object level security out of the box, but just want to touch on this a little bit more. The risk associated with this is, since there is one point of truth, that also gives the ability of increased risk. Users can go in and assign row level security, object level security, assign someone to a wrong role. And if that is done, they'll be able to see everything in the model. So that's just, I'd say that's the biggest challenge with this approach. But with that, training and making sure that people who are giving access are aware of how to properly do it, that's where the training comes in. The last three: sophisticated maintenance. Since it's one large file, it normally involves more involved maintenance, just because you have to be aware of the different relationships in the model. The setup is a little bit more involved, just because it's kind of pulling everything into one model. And then there is the potential for performance issues, because we're pulling from multiple tables and having it all in one model. That the performance issues are there, but again, that is where proper modeling and I'd say ETL comes in, with having everything pushed upstream to the data warehouse comes in to mitigate this. Next slide, Johnny.
And Jordan, just to make some compliment here, this screen, probably you cannot see the details, it's very small, but when you, meaning, the audience, when I showed before kind of gave a tour of the 5,000 reports and dashboards that are in Power BI, they're actually attached to these two approaches, either the Galaxy, the unified model, or the star schema. And this is, if you were to be able to see the tables, they are the DFT. In the middle, you're gonna see F, AR agent today, F for fact, sales invoice, F, inventory planning, F, GL financial. So we have in the middle already this DFT named as facts. The other tables that are, the around is called D as dimension, and there's also the time series. And if you are working with an ERP system in Power BI and you wanna, accelerate the modeling, DFT can connect to existing ERPs very easily. We have on our website about a dozen different ERPs that plug and play in a day. If you have an ERP that is not listed on our website, usually takes days, maybe a few weeks, to plug the raw data into the DFT layer. Once the raw data is connected to the DFT layer, then those 5,000 plus reports and dashboards in Power BI become live next day, and then you can start customizing it. We're kind of just showing the concepts here, but this model is being helping a lot of clients get the Power BI journey dramatically accelerated, not only to get it faster out of the box and quickly, but then, as I mentioned before, and Jordan also touched a little bit, in the long run, to maintain a DFT layer to separate the raw mapping into the Power BI semantic model is usually like a godsend. It's easier, faster for each team to do their part of the job. And for the business analyst that doesn't need to know exactly how the tables work on the system, they just work with the DFT. They usually have business-friendly names. If you look at the table names in the DFT, the field names, they all are friendly to humans, not necessarily for the coding that works behind the scenes. Jordan, we only have 5 minutes to go. The next slide
Yep.
primarily is an overview. I
Yeah,
think we can skip.
yeah, we could skip the next slide and get into some of the Q&A. I see we have a question I can answer right now. So Eric asked the question. Question is, with the ETL plus warehouse, could Power BI report builder access as a data source? Yeah, so yeah, Power BI report builder, yeah, you can access it. You can access it two different ways. You can either use, depending on the approach, if you go the star schema approach, the module based model or the unified model, you can use the Power BI semantic model as a source for report builder. Or if you don't want to do that and you want to connect to the data warehouse by just through that connection, you can also go that route. So there are two routes. I recommend going through the Power BI semantic model because all of the data is already brought in. If you connect to the data source directly, it's not difficult. It's just more involved with you just kind of writing SQL and kind of putting a query together so it can read it.
Yeah, in Jordan, just to complement, usually when we go to a client that is not using data warehousing and we add the data warehouse layer, sometimes the people who have been connected to the data source directly, they see a friction. Oh, why do we need to put a barrier between Power BI and the data source? It's a good question. And sometimes the answer is you should, sometimes you should not. And only once you know exactly when Power BI is going to start to choke down the road, that you should know, use the data warehouse approach instead of directly. In our journey, usually tell people, initially do the thing that is easier for you, right? But as you become more knowledgeable about the components and how they play together, and the more you know about the data warehouse, I've seen more and more people that they tend to use eventually more the data warehouse than not. But it's a journey, and we don't bring shackles to the process. You don't need to use what we're telling you. But once you understand the value of the components and you understand, how important they are in the long run, usually the more and more you're going to be using the data warehouse as a staging database to facilitate the long-term process. Jordan, let me answer the next question, and then I think that the next one will be for you. David is asking about the screenshots. David, the screenshots that you can see, they are what is being showed in the report. And we have reports using multiple different reporting tools. If the look and feel is not exactly the way they expect, in reality, the real looking Power BI sometimes is slightly different, but the kind of data you see, the kind of reports and dashboards is the same as in the screenshot. So it's not 100% accurate, the picture, but the data that you see is also in Power BI represented in a similar approach. Jordan, would you answer Julio's question?
Yep. So this question, why is time separate from dimension in your concept? So this has to do with, a lot of it has to do with when it comes to one, storage. Just a lot of times when if you were to keep time dimensions in each of the tables, let's say you want to report on, instead of just having it at the date level, you want it to be month, year, that type of thing. You're having it in each table specifically, in each of your fact tables specifically. The table is going to be larger. That's one reason. The second reason is more specific to business intelligence solutions. So Power BI does very well with a date table when you're actually building a model. Power BI has an option. I always recommend people use this option of marking. You can mark a date table as a date table. And what that does, and why you want to separate a timetable, is it allows you to control date hierarchies. So in our date table has a lot of different date formats. So month, year, month name, days, day of the week, days in the month, that type of thing. So having one table that stores all of that data and then links to all of your fact tables is just efficient, best practice. And when you end up going to build reports, it's also going to be easier with that. There's also Power BI has some features called calculation groups. So what that does is it allows, and our model, we have it built in. It allows users to essentially take any calculation or metric that they want. And then since we have a timetable, Power BI lets us create calculation groups. So what that lets us do is essentially drag and drop functionality. So if you want to build a report, you can drag and drop the metric, your calculation group, and it'll show you, it'll aggregate everything however you want it at the month to date, year to date, month over month change, that type of thing.
We have to wrap it, sorry. Well, we have some other questions that we're going to be checking in answer by email, but I appreciate you all for being part of the session. Jordan, thanks for the presentation. It's being recorded, and once we edit it, we're going to put it on the YouTube in case you want to rewatch it or share with others. If you guys have more questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to us. Thanks for your time and hope you enjoyed a great day.